Well, hello, my name is Jim Royal. I'm a huge Beatles and Elvis Presley fan and basically classic rock in general. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. If you could do a thumbs up, that's always most appreciated. And feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy reading them and I do my best to try to respond in a timely manner. Today what I wanted to do is a little something different than most YouTubers do. A lot of YouTubers that are Beatle fans, they'll show you vinyl, they'll show you CDs, they'll even show you 8-tracks, but usually they don't show you cassettes. And what I think is interesting about the cassettes that I'm going to show you is these are U.S. Albums from the Beatles, from the 1960s predominantly, and then into the 70s and past that. So basically what happened was the Beatles were signed to a UK label called EMI. And they would put out generally 2 studio albums out a year. They usually had a few singles that were standalone, non-album singles and rare B-sides, things like that. Okay, that's what they did. Well, here in the States, they had a sister company called Capitol. And Capitol was reluctant to release anything from the Beatles. Finally, they did. And when they did, they had a few albums that were released by that time in the UK. And most of the UK albums, like I said, had 14 songs. The US versions, rather, had 11 or 12. Now, I heard in an interview, I think George Martin said, the Beatle producer, it had something to do with the royalties. I think here in the States it would be a per song royalty that the record companies would be charged. So they didn't want to do that. So they got a little skimpy, okay? But what it allowed them to do is create their own albums. They have in some cases, some totally different albums. They have old material, new material, singles, B-sides thrown on a regular album. It wasn't until the mid-60s that finally they started having the same album title, and the most part the songs were the same until a little bit later. Okay, so I wanted to show you something. This was a boombox, a cassette player that I got for my 14th birthday. I'm sorry, when I was 14 at Christmas time. So it's a sound design, really cool. I spent hours and hours not only creating fun tapes and stuff, but also playing my Beatles. My Beatles were and still are my favorite group, period. Though it is funny, my first cassette that I ever got, if I'm not mistaken, was the Stray Cats, Built for Speed. But anyway, it still works. It's excellent. The radio is really good on it too. And I would play with these different tapes my mom would get me for hours upstairs in my room. And generally, she knew someone at a record store. I would generally get about 2 cassettes, at a time. I remember Let It Be being one of my first ones. Okay, so why don't we take a look at the collection. I'll give you a little bit of history about these and release dates too, okay? Some cases, the cassettes, actually the images are altered from the vinyl versions, and it's pretty interesting. So what they would do is the US would even put reverb, and they would do some other things to these songs that the Beatles did not like at all. So why don't we start out with the first one. The first one I'm going to talk about, though, is called Introducing the Beatles. Now, Introducing the Beatles was on the small label VJ, and supposedly it was released July of 1963, and then later they re-released it during Beatlemania with slightly different tracks and order in January of 1964. Now, I don't have it. I don't believe that they ever came out on cassette, because of the fact that by the late 60s, they basically went under that record label. So Capitol finally decided that they wanted to get into the Beatlemania, and they did, January of 1964. This is the first album that was released officially here on that, and it's called Meet the Beatles. And check that out. So that's the cassette. And I'm gonna a little closer here for you. So see, just a little different with the album. Look at that. It's cool. So that's with the Beatles cover, but let's meet the Beatles here. And then you've got the original Capitol logo there. Stereo cassette, all of this is stereo. It was by the early 80s that I started, getting these. Now, what this means, basically, this is the spine, it's light blue, Capitol. From my understanding, if it was an official 60s release originally, it's light blue on cassette. I know the Beach Boys were the same thing. And then got the song listings there, program 1, program 2. And there's no bells and whistles to this at all. Look at this. It's just no booklets, nothing. Just the music. Let the music do the talking, right? But most of the cassettes looked exactly like this. They were this white color, really cool. And look at that. It's 14 minutes on one side on program 1. And then on program 2, it's 13 minutes. Check that out. Okay. All right. So that's the first one. The next one is called the Beatles' second album. And I believe this was released April of 1964, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, looking good. The songs on here. There you go. So like I said, most of these albums were under 30 minutes, it seems to be. All right, and then the next album is actually a soundtrack. And this one is the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night. And A Hard Day's Night was from United Artists, and it was released June of 1964. So not only does this feature Beatles, but it also features George Martin, the Beatle producer, and his orchestra. So this is more of a rare find. It'd be nice to have those George Martin songs on there. I know Ringo's theme is on here, but that's what you get. And if you look at the, Hard Day's Night, it's different than the Hard Day's Night cover with all the photos. It's just one of each Beatle. There's the cassette, side 1, and then, program 1 and program 2. Okay? All right, now the next album is called Something New. Okay? Now this one was released July of 1964. Okay? Looks like it's got some stuff off of A Hard Day's Night, right? At least the songs that they're showing there. This is a really good album. Okay. And it was really fun just discovering the Beatles. I think one of my first Beatle cassettes was Let It Be. And it was in no order. I had like some little magazines that showed what the albums were, so I would ask my mom. But like I said, she knew somebody at a record store that was really familiar with the Beatles, probably a really big fan, and was able to help her out. So it was just really fun getting, a lot of times, about 2 cassettes at a time, and then just, listening to them for the first time. All right, the next one is not, it was on Capitol, but this is a real rare one here. I just could not find it. This was one that was not in my original collection, okay? It's called The Beatles Story. It's predominantly an interview album, okay. Incidental music. This is, I think, is a European version, 747 Pop Records. And to me, this looks like it was something that was around 1980, this particular cassette version. But it was November 64. It was a double album when it first came out. So this one's kind of rare. I like this. And here we go. Beatles Story. Okay. All right, next one is Beatles 65. This was one where I didn't own the cassette until a few years ago. And I think the reason was I was told, well, you already have the record, so you don't need the cassette. So I wanted to complete the collection. This was released December of 1964, originally Beatles 65. So this looks like some stuff right out of Beatles for Sale, okay? And look at the altered work a little bit. See, it looks just different how they're doing it. They're trying to fit the image on the cassette on the one side. They got limited space without making it too small. It's visually, very appealing. But this is one of the original ones from back in the day. Track listing. Program 2, I did that wrong, sorry. Here's program 1. And then there you go with program 2. Okay? Alright. So the next release is called The Early Beatles. And this originally came out March of 1965. So by the time when VJ was done having the rights to the Please Please Me material, which is what Introducing the Beatles really was, Capitol finally got their hands on it, and they decided to release this called The Early Beatles, because it had already been, a few years since. So, and as we know, the Beatles continued to evolve with their sound, so that could have been one reason too. But anyway, that's a very nice picture there. If I'm not mistaken, isn't that Beatles for Sale? The cover? Anyway, looks pretty good. You can see the 1970s logo for Capitol. And then we've got, yeah, look at that. And then here are the songs. Baby It's You is the song that's right underneath Chains that you can't see. Okay. All right. And then, okay. All right, Beatles 6 is the next one. And Beatles 6 is another one of those records that we had at home and was not part of my personal cassette collection until years later. This particular release originally came out June of 1965. And it's got the 1970s logo for Capitol again. I love that picture. I just think that's so cool. Again, it's a little slightly altered, or it's, zoomed in compared to the U.S. vinyl version of it. Okay. All right. So now we have Help. So Help came out. This is the original soundtrack, okay? So it's different, once again, than the other soundtrack, well, like Hard Day's Night, because this also has instrumental music in there, I believe from George Martin again and his orchestra, and it's got the Beatles songs. So this version came out, oh, I'm sorry. So Ken Thorne and his orchestra produced, or were the ones that did the songs on here, not George Martin, my mistake. So I'm glad I cleared that up. That's August of 1965. Okay, so you get soundtrack music and things that are kind of harder, you know, normally you don't hear. Again, look at the 70s logo. It was funny how not all the albums look like that. And let's show you the back. Okay, the spine, and then, so again, this was one of the original ones in the collection. I really love Help because it's got, at the beginning, it's got the James Bond theme, just a, you know, a beginning of it, and it's just really cool. I really like that version, and I've heard it on the Beatles channel, and I thought that was kind of cool. I hadn't heard that for a while. All right, now we're going to Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul here. This was released December of 1965. Okay, again, look at the album cover. It looks, now we know that there's a British version with the same title, but the songs are different. They're all over the place. Rubber Soul, Help. You got a bunch of different things. This is more of a folksy album, this version, and actually the Americans did really good with this, I thought. Again, because it's a cassette, they have the same artwork, at least of the faces, but, you know, to make it more appealing and not have, you know, all that, they've got, you know, the one color in the back. I think it's pretty cool what they did. All right, you got that. You got the classic one. Here's the songs on here. I think probably for many of you this would be the most interesting thing. This is how I grew up listening to the Beatles, you know, but it's been so long that I've been hearing the UK versions that, you know, that's what I'm used to now. Again, look at that. Now you see the 1970s version of Capitol on there. That's kind of amazing, isn't it? Look at that. All right. See what's next here. This is a totally created album called Yesterday and Today. Yesterday and Today came out June of 1966. And originally they had the Butcher cover on there, not on any versions like that. It was just some of the vinyl. But anyway, this had, what was cool about this, it had some songs that were on the UK Revolver that had not been released yet, because this came out before. So this was a nice way for us to hear some earlier songs. The other thing I wanted to mention too that I forgot to is there's a song called Bad Boy on Beatles 6, and that was the first time that we had a song that, if I'm not mistaken, that the UK didn't have. That later would be on a collection that I'll show you in a moment for the UK, but that was recorded for the US. So here's Yesterday and Today. And here's the track listings. And sometimes cassettes were faded like this. It's just the way it was. You know, it hasn't, it's not necessarily aged, it just has faded. Just the way that they made it. All right, so now we're going on to Revolver. This is the Revolver that most people don't like because it is Revolver 11 songs and it's missing 3 songs. Everything else is on there. So kind of a letdown, but again, that's the US market. That's what they did. So this was released August of 1966. Artwork is there. It's kind of like shrunk in there, but you got the artwork. Okay. All right. Pretty cool, huh? And see, it's back to the classic 60s logo. All right, now the next one, this was a collection of Beatles oldies. This is not Capitol Records. This is what the UK would have seen. And this was released during Christmas time. I believe it was November, December 66, but it was definitely that time period. It includes Bad Boy, which was the song that was recorded originally for the US market. All right, so this is a EMI version Parlophone. And it's one of the rare ones that I have. I know in the 90s, I believe this is in the 90s, this is kind of how the look was. These cassettes came out. I didn't buy the cassettes because I just wasn't doing that anymore. And I figured I had the ones that I wanted anyway. Yeah, so you got EMI, Parlophone label. And this looks like my James Bond's Best of soundtrack too. The cassette look. So this would have been, I don't know, this could have been actually like early 80s here, I think. Okay. And the track listing's a little different. Look at that. Okay. They weren't able to record an album in '66 for the UK, so they decided to put together a best of collection. All right. And it's actually kind of cool. Look at that. That one actually has like a little booklet with it. Alright, so now we're going to go to a second version that I found of this. This is on the Fame label. I think this is probably from the late 70s. I'm just not sure, but I just thought this was kind of cool too, so I picked this up. Now, these were not in my original collection, okay? I'm going to make that clear. This collection of Beatles oldies was not part of it. I picked this up the last couple of years, and this is one of those cool cassettes that you're going to get to see. That, oh, look at that booklet. Little booklet, not much, but at least you get something here with this. Clear tape, check that out. I loved that. I love that. So this had to have been, I'd say this had to have been later 80s, early 90s, this version, I'm guessing. And this is a European copy, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so now we are going to Sgt. Pepper, June of 1966. Finally, from here on out, we started having the same album covers, same titles. There was just one alteration, which the Americans did good on, and same track listing and stuff. Now, like I said, sometimes with cassettes, they would economize the tape because they didn't want to have a lot of wasted tape and stuff, so they would change things around. They did do that in one particular case. Later on I'll show you. So there's the spine, the album that we all know and love. Again, nothing in there. And see that smudge, that's how it was when I got it. It was nothing, I still remember that. And and Revolver, I forgot to tell you. Revolver, there was a problem sometimes with, you have natural stuff. There was something wrong with Revolver, and at a point it went in and out, the sound. And I just thought, well, maybe that's how it was, but no, it was just a bad tape, and that's how I got it. All right, so Magical Mystery Tour, this was November of 1967. Now, the Beatles had an EP, Magical Mystery Tour, which only had the first side of this. The Americans were really good in the fact that they put the other singles, non-album tracks from 67 on there, including B-sides. They did a great job. And look, you can see the cover's a little cropped. But anyway, that's it. You got the classic look again. Okay. Track listing. I think they got it right on this one. They didn't butcher anything. They actually added something and made a really nice album. Look at that. All right, we're almost done here. I know this is a longer video, but I'm just trying to show these to you. Now this was interesting. The White Album, it came with a cardboard which I still have. I just don't have it handy. So basically, look at the White Album here. Check it out. Look at that. So you have part 1 and part 2. So these were the photographs that are stenciled here on the cassette. Totally different. You got the 1970s logo again. Stereo cassette, of course. So this was released November of 1968 originally. And then that's the first one. There you go. There you go. And then we've got this. This is the same one, but I like because the White Album is just called The Beatles. So it's called Part 2. Make sure that you did that right. Part 1 and Part 2. Okay. All right, now we're going to go to Yellow Submarine. The soundtrack, the original version, this was January of 1969. So again, you have one side Beatles, you have the other side George Martin and his orchestra. But what's interesting is you also have Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds on here on the B-side. So you have the 6 songs on the one side, and then you have Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which I totally forgot about on cassette. I think that's different, which is really cool. Look at that. Yeah. See? That's cool. You got the 70s logo again. Okay. All right. Next we have Abbey Road. This was, for us anyway, October of 1969. And yeah, you got everything on there. They're showing everything. It's like the shirt that I'm wearing today. And you got the 70s look, you know, that logo. But the difference is look, Here Comes the Sun starts it, and then Something. Isn't that amazing? Now, we know that Come Together led the album, right? But in order, I guess, to save time, they reversed the songs. So that was amazing. And what you got is you got Come Together on the B side instead of starting it off. I was amazed at that. That's the way that I listened to this album. I had no idea. All right, now we have Hey Jude. Hey Jude was released in 1970. So I'm going to show you the difference here. That was released February of 1970. And this is where we've got the black here. So this was basically a collection of songs, predominantly singles from my understanding, okay? And it's a lot of later day. I think Hey Jude deserved to be on an album, and here it was. It was one of the biggest singles from the Beatles. They put this together. It's got the 70s look, got the black spine instead of the light blue. So these are how the cassettes looked afterward. So you have some older songs, Can't Buy Me Love on there. I should have known better, Paperback Writer and Rain. You know, those songs that were not on albums. Old Brown Shoe, Ballad of John and Yoko. Definitely deserving to be on an album. Okay, now we have Let It Be, and this was released, when was this released? May of 1970, right? So here we go. Okay. The traditional Capitol label, which is kind of strange. This was probably the first cassette that I ever got from the Beatles. This was an early one. Because when my mom got them for me, they came in no order. Okay. Yeah, look at that. All right. Almost done here. I've got the red and the blue albums right now. These were released April of 1973. They're double albums. And 1962 to 66, and then 67 to 70. I love these albums. Now, I had this red album on vinyl, but I talked my mom into saying, look, I really want this. I really want this. Come on. So I did get it, and I played it a lot. Okay, I have 2 more cassettes after this, and then it's done. And I thank you for watching all of this video. If you're still watching it, I appreciate that. Yeah, and see, these are long. So the first side is 30 minutes and then 31 minutes for the second. Check out, though, the blue album. Now, I don't know. I don't remember if it's kind of hard to read and blurry. I don't know if that's just how the print, maybe it was just, you know, bad job. I don't know. But anyway, that's it. And it's hard to read here, too. See? Yeah, and it's pretty exciting, the red and the blue album. They're just really nice collections. When I think of best ofs, this is where I go to before number ones or 20 greatest hits. This is what I like. I thought this was done very, very well. And as you can see, one side is 49 minutes, the other is 48, so they have it pretty equal. All right, I have 2 rare cassettes to show you that I got back in the day in the early 80s. This is called Beatles Great Artist Series. This is not Capitol. One of the things, it's in the budget bin, not really sure what you're getting. I believe, yeah, these are actually Decca tapes. And this is the Beatles Volume 2, which is funny. So, 3 Cool Cats. You Got Money, I think, is the only one that they recorded, you know, legit, you know, that was on an official release. But these are their Decca audition tapes, January 1962. And you can see it's barely any tape on there. I wouldn't be surprised if this is like, I don't know, maybe like 23 minutes long or something. I mean, I can't imagine it being that long. All right, last one for the day is Rare Beatles. Now, I also have a part 2 of this, which is going to continue on with the 1970s collections and go through the 80s and up until 2000. So I'll show you that, or what I have cassettes for a later time. And then I even have some solo Beatles, which I want to show you for another time too. This one is called Rare Beatles. It was on the Phoenix record label. I think this was 1981, if I'm not mistaken, that this was. It says all over it. Pretty cool, look. These are one of the budget ones, again, that you're not paying as much as you normally would. You're taking a chance on it. You're thinking, hey, I've got some songs on here that I'm not familiar with. And I believe these are Star Club recordings, live at the Star Club in Hamburg, Germany. Okay. All right. There we go. All right, well, I want to thank you very much for watching my video. There's the inside there. And you have a good day. Take care. Bye.